So I work for Vodafone Group. So Vodafone is quite a complicated company because it's quite large. So within Vodafone Group, we have the kind of central, almost like administration role, if you like. So our job is to try and figure out things that will help all of the local markets within Vodafone. So within Vodafone Germany, Vodafone 3, sorry, Vodafone Ireland, Portugal, Greece, Romania. Um, and the aim is that we do things internally within our teams that will help every single one of those markets and all the millions of customers that they've got. My role in particular is why I work in the strategy team. So I remember when, when I got my job about 5 years ago, my boss said that we're going to be looking long-term trends, like 5 years out, understanding the kind of really big impacting things. Right now, things are moving so quickly. We're probably looking
I was
six
just
months
thinking
out,
five
maybe a
years
quarter, right?
ago was before ChatGPT showed up, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. It was. I joined just around the pandemic actually, so
Mm.
slightly longer than 5 years ago, and it was a very, very different world. The
Yeah.
pace now is so quick that yeah, like I said, we're looking 6 months out at the moment.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. So, you've previously mentioned the Vodafone Group has identified a huge number of potential use cases for AI. So, maybe a good first question, given the topic of this briefing, is how did you prioritize which ones to run with, at least first?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we've currently got so we've got so many now. We actually have a Power BI application that tracks them all and does that work for us. There's over 900 ideas sitting in there right now from right across the group. So what we have is a framework that allows us to prioritize which ones are going to be the most useful, and it basically it works on two axes, right? The axis at the top is so on the vertical axis is basically feasibility. So can we do it? Does the technology exist? Do we have the people? Do we have the data? Is the data in the right place? This type of stuff. And the axis along the bottom is the benefit. So is it going to either save us money or will it make our customers money? Will it improve our differentiation? Will it reduce churn? Those sorts of metrics. So we go through each use case, which is a little bit painful, I'll be honest, but it's slowed down now. We've almost reached a kind of steady state of new use cases. We go through each one and we rank it on those axes with a different set of metrics. Then it comes up with a weighted average, and that basically puts it on a graph that says this is where this use case sits in terms of its viability and its benefit. And then we basically would just cherry pick the top 4 or 5, work those through, test them, prove them. If they work, happy days. They become more widely rolled out. If they don't work, then we can say, right, that didn't work for these reasons, and we then slightly modify the criteria to say, actually, we've seen this hasn't worked for these types of reasons. Therefore, we won't prioritize that sort of use case next time. So we've become really good actually at, I don't like the term, but failing fast. So when things aren't going to work, when things don't deliver the benefit that you hope, you cut it off really quickly. Go right, that's not going where you need it to go. Let's work on the next one.
So I thought it was interesting when we were talking before this session is that in terms of the hours of work saved, the Copilot rollout is probably the top achiever, and I just think it's quite amusing that it's not the most exciting.
Oh, it's the least sexy
That's
thing we've
not
done
the
with
point,
AI
though, is it?
easily, right? I mean, we've rolled out Copilot to I think it's 60,000 people now, and because of the cost involved in doing something at that scale, it gets tracked quite heavily internally. So we've done surveys, we've kind of done day in the life of types of studies to see how it's made an impact. And the last survey that I saw went out to we had 3,000 responses, and on average, people said they'd save 2.5 hours per week. So I mean that's a huge amount. That goes to something like it's about
And I was just
150,000
wishing my
hours
maths were better.
across the group, right? And I think
Sorry,
that's
say that
like
again.
it's about 150,000 hours a week across the group if you scale it
Oh,
out, and
blimey.
that's like hiring almost 4,000 people because just purely because of the efficiencies, right? So what it's really good at is taking away a lot of the kind of monotonous stuff that you kind of just have to do. So I'll give you one example, right? I've got an agent that I've written, which is that makes me sound like a developer. I'm not a developer in any way. It's a really simple thing that basically goes through your inbox every morning at about 8 o'clock, goes through all of the notifications that I get from news sources, from vendors, from analysts, from partners, analyzes them all for anything that I'm going to want to see, anything I'm going to want to kind of learn about in more detail. Gives me a list of the top 5 or 10 or 15 things. Said, Andy, this is what you want to read. I've been the rest. And it does save me genuinely at least half an hour every morning from having to go through and just read the 3 or 4 bits that are really relevant to me on that day versus the 40 or 50 that I might get otherwise.
As opposed to the usual wading through treacle is how I feel
Mm,
about a lot of my email. Um,
exactly.
okay. So where did you put in the early effort around deploying AI? What were the first steps? And we can talk about Gen AI and agentic AI.
Yep. So, being a telco, we are fortunate enough to deal in a very heavily regulated environment. I don't mean that as a joke. I genuinely think it helps us to operate as a better company. But it does mean that
Okay.
when we look at these types of new opportunities, we do have a slightly different lens to lots of other industries. So, one of the first things that we did was trying to understand how we could protect our users and our customers from all the new cool stuff we knew we wanted to go and do. So, we put a lot of effort into building a platform called AI Booster. So AI Booster is kind of like almost like a proxy for AI. So if I'm talking to a large language model using a tool that I've developed, I route my request through AI Booster. And what AI Booster does is it checks for any things like prompt injection attacks, for any kind of security threats. Am I using any language that I shouldn't? Am I asking it to do things that are inappropriate or, not condoned by the company or by the EU AI Act, as an example? Um, and if it's all fine, it passes it through to the AI service, and I get my response back. But what it means is that whenever I deploy a new service internally, whenever I build something using the tools that we've got, I don't need to go and start from scratch from a security perspective because I know that if I route it through AI Booster, my compliance with the EU Act is already given. My ability to prevent most security threats is already there. It's not perfect, right? It can't be perfect given the pace of change.
Mm.
But that early focus on that area around security and regulation and protection has meant that, yes, we were possibly slightly slower getting some of the initial use cases done, but now we can go faster because we have that level of protection for what we're doing internally.
So it's interesting that this kind of governance guardrail you've called AI booster, whereas many people kind of regard it as a necessary but sort of a necessary nuisance, really. So it's quite interesting. You've had a very different mindset in
Yeah,
deploying in
I mean,
deploying.
to me, it's an enabler. We could
Yeah.
spend, I could, and in my previous role, which was technical pre-sales, I would have sat here and moaned about security and the fact that it always slows us down, it always gets in the way. But sitting here now with a kind of, I guess, a wider oversight, it's the best thing we could have done because it has meant that what we do now is so much more grounded. It's so much more likely to succeed because we can go faster because we've already got those guardrails built in place to allow us to experiment.
And I mean, how much effort's going to have to go into the constant updating of the booster?
So an entire
I guess
team
it's just
look after it.
forever.
Um,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, it'll have to be. It will become easier to manage as you get more agentic capabilities in it, but you'll always have a human in the loop at some point when you're developing new things, when you're creating these new scenarios, because as good as the AI services are, they still need that level of sense check, I think, from a human. But yeah, there's an entire team who look after AI Booster and to look at integrating new models, look at any new regulations that we need to be compliant with, look at any new scenarios
Mm.
that have come up that we haven't thought about before. So yeah, it's a full-time job. I'm not sure how big the team is. It's not massive. It's maybe a handful of people, but that is their day-to-day job now.
Okay. What about looking at, did you start by looking at the business outcomes you wanted to achieve when you're thinking about the possible capabilities AI brings? I mean, assuming that you've done all the guardrail and all that stuff, as we've just said.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we did. So the reason that I'm pausing looks like I'm making up an answer. I'm not. I'm trying to work out. I'm trying to remember the exact timelines in my head. But yes, so we do. So when it comes to the services we develop, I mentioned that matrix around the feasibility versus the benefits. If we do have some examples where they're not technically feasible, but we can see the benefits are huge, those ones do get prioritized because of the things we can do to help our customers. So coming from a technology company, it's really easy to start with the technology and say, oh, look, I've got this new cool thing that can do this. What can I then do with it?
Yeah.
What we spend a lot of time doing is talking to our customers about what they're interested in, what they would accept from an AI perspective. And that's part of the reason why, if you look at some of our network developments as an example, we haven't prioritized automated AI creation of networking capabilities because customers didn't want us to. They were quite explicit by saying, no, my network is so critical to me. I don't want an AI agent configuring it, tearing sites down, creating new sites unless I have more confidence in it. So we've deliberately not prioritized those areas, even though the benefits are probably huge. And we've gone for other areas where we do think the customers are more mature in their understanding of what's happening. So things like customer service, that type of interaction with your bill, with your data, that's where we think we could deliver quite a lot of benefit, and customers are prepared to accept that sort of help rather than in the more mission critical stuff where they're still a bit more nervous around, what could go wrong rather than what could go right.
Okay, so really it's about waiting for the technology to mature and customers to have confidence rather than sort of going too fast and alarming customers.
Yeah, and we have a role to play there as well. So we need to be educating our customers
Mm.
around what we've done to test it, what we've done to prove it, why we think it's the right thing to do. The worst thing we could do would be just to sit around and wait for lots of other companies to say, "This is AI, it's amazing, you can trust it. We've proven it in this scenario and that scenario." Um, our job isn't to be leading the charge, saying AI is the greatest thing ever. It's going to change your world. Our job is to be helping our customers to fundamentally understand what it is and how it works. I spent quite a bit of time actually just basically explaining how ChatGPT works, how a large language model works. You can see as soon as you go through that, a lot of the risks, a lot of the threats that people perceive from AI taking over the world and kind of having these amazing free thinking thoughts around, oh, I could run that better. I'm going to displace that customer. As soon as they actually understand how these things work and that they are effectively glorified statistical calculators, they become a little bit more trusting because they're not nervous around it taking their job. They're now more thinking, okay, so if the risk isn't there, how can I use it? I do find that education is the best thing that we
So
do with
they
our
need
customers.
to see it as a tool, not a threat.
Oh, without a doubt,
But
without
a
a doubt.
tool that needs controlling, but all tools do.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, yeah, it is genuinely no different using a calculator. The first time you give a calculator to a kid and it say, yeah, or a phone and say, right, this can do this, they go, really? Huh? If you can get that level of awareness, go, oh yeah, all right, so I trust it to do this because it's going to do this kind of weighted based calculation of which token comes next. It becomes much easier for them to accept using it in more scenarios.
So how hard was it getting your data to the point you could apply AI? I mean, I know you've done a lot of work as a group early with data on data getting Google. We've been working with Google for a decade, I guess. But
Mm.
I'm just thinking when you set all that up, you weren't thinking about applying agentic AI to it or Gen
Nope.
AI for that matter.
No, no, we absolutely weren't. How hard has it been? Very, 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 very hard. I think it's fair to say. One of the simultaneous sort of joys and challenges of working at a company like Vodafone is that we have access to huge amounts of data.
Mm.
But if you, like I say, we've worked with Google for 10 years to kind of centralize and aggregate it. If I go back 11 years before we started doing that, it was in hundreds upon hundreds of different places with different data access control methods, with different data privacy regulations, different legal statutes applied to it. We're now in a really good place, actually, when it comes to data. The amount of work that's been put in by the technology teams to centralize into a single data ocean so it's basically it's a data ocean that's made up of different data lakes and different kind of pockets of information. So there are still, I guess, the separation that we need from a legal and regulatory standpoint. But when it comes to accessing it, if I go to that top level, I can then kind of filter down into all the different component pieces. Um, the other things we've seen really cool innovations coming from different parts of Vodafone. So Vodafone Turkey, as an example, have really strong data privacy regulations. The laws in Turkey are quite prohibitive in terms of what data can go out and into the country. So they've had to do quite a lot independently because they couldn't use um, a lot of the cloud-based services because of those data privacy regulations. So you see real innovation coming from some of the markets, and we can take that and go, oh, that's fantastic. Why don't we apply that to this market or to this segment or to this product? And that's really helped us to accelerate. So I think once you've got the data, that is by far the hardest bit from my perspective. Once it's in a single location, or then or at least within a documented set of locations, all of a sudden the opportunities just skyrocket from there.
Okay, so you feel you're in a good place with the data, and that's kind of in many ways, I kind of see that as the launch pad, really,
Mm,
that
yeah,
and the
exactly.
guardrails. And so what you've got your data, it's accessible and in a usable form, for want of a
Yeah,
better word. What about the integration element? How painful was that?
less painful because we've used a lot of standards to ensure that all the tools that we develop internally and the tools that we buy from our suppliers are as simple to interoperate as possible. So what we did quite early on was we worked with some of the standards bodies, so TM Forum for the North-South APIs and what was MEF at the time, the Metro Ethernet Forum, now called Amplify. We use them for a lot of the East-West services. So if I'm exchanging data from a kind of customer through to a UI user interface system into a backend system, that's typically using TM Forum APIs. If I'm exchanging data between different applications, that's where I'm tending to use some of the MEF standards or the Amplify standards. And what it means is that when we go to procurement, so we have a really strong procurement function based out in Luxembourg who do a lot of
Yeah.
kind of group-wide buying for us. When we work with them, they are now so well used to these standards that if we say, right, I want to look at a new SD-WAN vendor as an example, they'll come up with a set of requirements, and that set of requirements will instantly contain, do you support TM Forum APIs for service catalog and for service support, or do you support MEF interactions for talking to other networking capabilities? And that's really pervasive now across the group. We spend a lot of time working with the standards bodies. We're participating in quite a few of their so TM Forum Catalyst, but also we've got someone now sitting on the board of Amplify, looking at things like SD-WAN and SASE standards.
So just in case anybody's not familiar, Emma, Amplify is, I don't know why I've raised my hand, ignore it. Um, so MEF, what was started off as the Metro Ethernet Forum, is now called Amplify, just in case
Yes.
anybody wasn't aware. So sorry, I had to interrupt you. Yeah.
No, no, it's fine. It's fine. So I think that focus on standards has meant that when it comes to integrating different tools with different parts of data with different AI services, we've made sure that that kind of standards layer is also built into AI Booster. So if I want to call a certain system, I can talk to AI Booster using that same sort of integration method. So it just sits as another layer now in our orchestration framework, and that means that the actual use of AI and that data has been less painful than it would have been had we started from scratch.
Okay, so really, after it's been a long slog, a decade slog, really. I was at TM Forum when it began, well, when it was announced, which is 2016, but work had been going on for at least a couple of years then. So finally, that's matured and is playing a key role
Mm.
here.
Without a doubt, yeah, it has been a lot of work, but it's now really starting to bear fruit.
Okay, and just you were talking about LLMs and data and how people perceive risk. So can you just clarify? I'm assuming that you keep control and ownership of your data at all times, even though you're using a third-party model and it's on a public cloud.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to the actual LLMs themselves, we're not in the business of training our own language models. We have looked at it quite extensively, but the benefits aren't there for the types of use cases that we're using them for at the moment. That might change in the future, but I don't think it will, if I'm honest. So when we tend to run them, what we'll do is we'll run them in our private instances within the public cloud. So as much as it's still sitting in the same availability zones in GCP or in Azure, it will be running a private version of that large language model accessing the data. So what we're not doing is giving Vodafone's data out to the kind of the public cloud in effect and saying to the large language models, it's stored here. You can have access through our security privileges. The actual model itself runs in our private instance. So it's a copy of the model. It's not it's still the same model, but it runs in a secured area rather than the wider public cloud. Um, I think that actually gives us the best of both worlds, right? Because it means we get access to the latest top performing models. They have all of the capabilities that the public facing ones do, but it means that there's a greatly reduced security threat to us because it all stays within our private instance with all of our private role-based access control, authentication, authorization tools and techniques. So it really is the best architecture that I think we've got. So you can think of it as like a hybrid cloud. So we get all the benefits like the elastic scalability of the public cloud, but in a private instance, it's just dedicated to us and our use cases.
And I believe you use also, I think you use all the big models for different purposes, I think, across your operations.
Yeah, we do. We do. So we do have large contractual agreements with with Google and with Microsoft. So we do a lot of work with the Gemma models and the Gemini models from Google. The Gemma ones in particular actually are really, really good for things like on-device use cases or for kind of faster, more portable types of use cases. The OpenAI models that we have through the Azure partnership are some of the best when it comes to that kind of deep reasoning and thinking. The development teams also have access to services like Claude Code. So we do have that ability to choose the best models for the best purpose, integrate them with AI Booster, and then we're off and running.
Okay, so it's a case of choosing the right model for the right job, really,
Yeah, absolutely.
given a whole set of different parameters. Presumably, that includes cost.
Yep. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, we've seen this shift towards token-based pricing. Um, for things like if I take the Copilot that I use today, there's no token-based pricing for that. It's still a subscription, but a lot of the coding capabilities are token-based. So, if we've got engineers who have access to Claude, they won't be using it to do email summary. They'll be using it purely for creating code and validating code that's been written previously. So yeah, we're actually pretty good now doing almost like our own kind of model routing function where we do choose the best model based upon cost is one component, but also which is the best one for the job. So if I will get a better response from using a more expensive model and I can justify that in my head, I'm free to choose that sort of model.
Okay, now, always one of my favorite questions, Andy, although not necessarily the interviewees, is if you'd known at the beginning what you know now, how
Hmm.
might you have approached the use of AI capabilities differently?
Yeah, that is a good question. I think the one thing that I didn't see coming was the relentless pace of change. So when, ChatGPT came out in 2022, it was huge. It was a massive
Yeah.
statement of intent that said, I can now use an AI service to instantly create me an email, to update a document, to generate images, that type of stuff. I think back then I thought, right, this is it. This is the new world. How do I now use this new world differently? And you start making long-term plans based upon the capabilities that exist today. I wish that I had been more aware that things were going to keep iterating at that pace now. But within 6 months or within a year, we'd have something like MCP, so the Model Context Protocol, that allows an AI solution to go and talk to an application and get data from that application. 6 months later, you get A2A, so agent to agent protocol that allows one agent to talk to another agent independent of a human. And these things just keep on snowballing, and the models keep getting better, they keep getting faster, they keep getting smaller in some cases, they keep getting bigger. And it means you're having to constantly kind of rebalance the types of things that you're developing and that you're building. And it's brilliant, right? It's so exciting to see all these things coming really, really quickly. But originally, when it first started happening, I had this mindset that, right, this is now the future. We're now here. This is what I need to start planning for. But I should have been much more flexible and thought about, right, this is the time we're in now, but these two or three things are also likely to happen. So I can start planning for these two or three things in the next 6 to 12 months. Um, I think I've kind of learnt my lesson now. I'm not taking anything for
I
granted. I'm now
doubt
just
you're
expecting
alone
things
in
to
that.
become
I'm
very
sure you're
different.
not. Yes, a bit like having your head over a fire hydrant, I would imagine. Um, So, with this constant flow of changes, oh, and I must say one thing to you as well that a senior exec at Orange said to me was the trouble with agents, now they
Mm,
can talk to each other, is they chat a lot, a bit like people, and also like people, it's not necessarily productive, but it uses a lot
yep.
of energy
Mm.
and cost. And so I thought that was quite funny. Anyway, but this constant change, does it mean that you have to redo fundamentals? I mean, do you have to go back and retro engineer, which is always painful and expensive and time consuming? Or is it a case of building on and adapting what you've done so far?
Yeah, it's very much the second. And it ties back to one of the
Okay.
previous answers around standards, right? So whilst like things like MCP and A2A aren't official standards, so they haven't been ratified by IETF or the IEEE or someone like that, they are in widespread use now. And so what we do is when we talk to an application, we'll use MCP. And it means that if we then want to change a supplier out because we found either a better one or a more cost-effective one, or the one we were working with doesn't have the right solution anymore, as long as the replacement supplier supports MCP and has that kind of integration, we're quite prepared to swap them out to use a different one. the thing that's going to slow us down at the moment is that we don't have enough standards like A2A and MCP. If I think about the way that the agents are working, things like agent discovery, there's no standard for agent discovery at the moment. I can't have a standard that says once I need to go find an agent to do a certain thing, this is how I find it, this is how I authenticate it, this is how I authorize it. Those are the bits that we're still kind of working around in a more manual process at the moment. So for agent discovery, as an example, we just have to go and work out where that agent sits and manually tell the other agents this is where you go and find it. Um, there's lots of work going on. So companies like Infoblox are looking at things called DNSA to basically using DNS, so the way we convert web pages into IP addresses using that sort of technology to go and discover AI agents. There's a really cool piece of work that the Cisco Outshift team have done called Agency. There's got probably the most complete framework I've seen for integrating AI agents at a kind of almost standards and protocol type of level. So we're working with all these different companies to try and understand which way we think the wind will blow fundamentally. But the joy is because of the way we've got this quite modular architecture, if we do have to change how we integrate from one set of tools to another set of tools, we've typically got these sorts of building blocks in between that allow us to change one component piece of the architecture because that's where the integration happens. So it's not going to be a huge amount of work for us to kind of rechange everything and to update everything that we've done. We're just now much more focused on which standards we think are going to win. It's a bit like if you rewind, what was it, like 40 years, VHS versus Betamax in the old
Yeah.
video wars, and Blu-ray versus Ultra HD or HD. I can't remember what it's called. But
Mm.
yeah, it's that type of technology thing we're trying to keep an eye on now, making sure we know which way we think it's going to go and try and lean into it a little bit faster. But if we have to change, we've got that capability.
So it's a case of changing components. It's not a case of struggling with the whole stack.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a big relief.
Yeah.
Andy, what are your next steps? What's Vodafone thinking about as your next ventures into or should I say adventures into
um, there's lots and lots and lots. So one of the things that we're doing at the moment is trying to work out. We have all these tools internally that we've built and that we've developed and that save us within Vodafone like thousands of hours a week as we've been through it. It's not just Copilot, it's a lot of stuff that we've built ourselves as well. We're trying to work out how we can use those tools to help our customers directly. So which ones can we directly put in front of a customer so that you can now use this? So if we've got something, so I mentioned before the networking examples, right? We have automated AI tools for our network that the engineers use to find root cause analysis much faster, restore the network much quicker. Like I said, customers didn't want those tools, but what we're starting to do now is say, right, look, we use these tools internally. We've seen the benefits. We've seen it improve your network performance in these key areas. Do you want to have a look at it? Do you want to give it a try? Just have those initial conversations with, I guess you call them friendly customers, to say, this is what we think is going to happen in the future. This is what we've got. Why don't you give it a try and see what you think? So I'm really excited about how that goes. There's a lot of work still going on around customer service and making sure you've got the right kind of integration methods for customer service. Voice AI, I think, is going to be huge, actually. And I think that's also an area that we as telcos have a really, really strong right to compete in. So if we were to go and write an agent to do office productivity, as an example, people wouldn't necessarily look at Vodafone as the right partner for that. But if we have an agent that does voice AI capabilities, that can be like an automated receptionist that we've launched recently, the AI concierge, that type of stuff, it does resonate really well with the Vodafone brand because it's a voice-based service. And that's still what we're most well known for. I think there's a lot of really cool stuff going on in that area. Things like translation, to give you an example, we can
yeah.
start doing more and more of that on device now. So I'm in, if you can't tell from the heat around me, I'm in Madrid right now at a European Commission conference, and I don't speak much Spanish. Having that kind of real-time translation built into my phone just makes life just that little bit easier when it comes to navigating and finding the right things and kind of having the right answers to conversations. So that I think is what I'm probably most excited about when it comes to what's being developed.
I thought it was quite fun when we were talking about the wave of iterations around agents and the framework about that, and where you have a human in the loop,
Yes.
a
Yep.
human. I'll let you explain this, the
So
various
yeah.
stages
Again,
of human.
at the risk of sounding like we're a company that does everything by matrix, we do have a matrix of where we apply humans versus AI in these types of mission critical workloads. And it basically, the level of automation goes at one side and the criticality of the workload goes on the bottom. So if we have a completely mission critical workload that is, going to have a significant impact to many customers if it were to go wrong, we will always, always, always have a human in the loop. So what that means is the AI solution will run through all the information it's got, come up with a recommendation and say, this is what I think we should do. But we won't allow it to act unless one of our engineers or one of our people has looked at it and gone, yes, that's the right thing to do. And then we'll allow it to automate. Whereas if it got a less critical task that's easier to automate, we'll have what's called a human on the loop. And that basically means that the kind of the person is allowing the AI to run autonomously to carry out the tasks. But when it comes to validation and verification, it will the person will do a sample check. So it might check one in every 100 if it's like a regular task. So has it done the right thing? Yeah, it's done the right thing, and it'll be allowed to go. You've also then got you've got HOOTL, human out of the loop, and that's where you allow it to go in a completely autonomous way, where we've kind of been through the different phases, we've tested and proven the capabilities. We know that the agents can be trusted to do what they're doing, and so we just let them run. And then any errors get flagged, any anomalies or exceptions get flagged, but other than that, it runs in the background doing its thing.
Okay, Andy, I'm really sad to say because I'd love to talk to you for a lot longer, but we're out of time. I think that was great. We look forward to welcoming you back sooner rather than later. We hope as a speaker, but in the
Pleasure.
meantime, I hope we don't sizzle too much in Madrid.
I'm going back
Although
to my air conditioned
even in
room
the
now.
UK, it's still pretty hot. Take good care. Thank you very much indeed.